Captain Britain was the first comic book that Marvel Comics specially created for the British market. He first appeared in Captain Britain Weekly in 1976, alongside other reprinted material from Marvel that included characters like the Fantastic Four, Nick Fury, and other agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Captain Britain, created by Chris Claremont, was pretty much fashioned as the British equivalent of Captain America. Claremont, who would later find fame in the United States for his run on the X-Men comics, only stayed with the series for 10 issues, claiming he and the editor did not see eye to eye. Captain Britain Weekly survived 29 additional issues after Claremont split, for a total of 39 installments between 1976 and 1977. Although some criticism of the character did exist, Captain Britain was widely accepted by the British, also stirring nationalist thoughts throughout the fanbase, the evidence of which was found in the letters to the editor printed in each issue. But I'm not here to talk about the history of Captain Britain. My purpose is to talk about Captain Britain in relation to Alan Moore. So the following are just a few major points of happening between the end of Captain Britain Weekly in 1977 and Alan Moore reimagining the Captain in 1982. In 1978, Chris Claremont returned to his creation to introduce Captain Britain to a national audience through the Marvel Universe's Marvel Team-Up series, where Captain Britain fought alongside Spider-Man. Later, that was reprinted in the UK as Super Spider-Man and Captain Britain. Then, in 1979, with the creation of Hulk comic, editor Des Skin picked up a new storyline involving Captain Britain, this time alongside the Black Knight, in a strip called The Otherworld Saga. And finally, in 1982, when current writer Dave Thorpe quit after a series of disputes with the management, who was recommended to fill the position but Alan Moore? Bernie J., editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics at the time, thought Alan Moore could take the story in a more acceptable superhero direction. The original Captain Britain wore mostly red, with the image of a lion on his chest and the Union Jack on his mask and wrists. When Alan Moore took over, he and artist Alan Davis redesigned the Captain for his relaunch in the Marvel Superheroes series. They did away with the lion, and instead used the Union Jack to comprise most of the costume, also adding the blue boots and white gloves. The white mask was even traded out for a Union Jack-infused helmet, which Moore has the Captain's real identity Brian Braddock comment on. Moore has the Captain's real identity Brian Braddock comment on in part of the story. But redesigning the Captain was the easy part. Alan Moore was now faced with an existing series, incomplete with previous storylines and a supporting cast. So what was Moore to do? Well, he did what any logically thinking writer would do. He killed off the main character. Say what? He killed off Captain Britain? Yes, he did. Here's a rundown of Moore's first few issues of Captain Britain. We are thrown headfirst into the action as the characters we come to know as Captain Britain, Jackdaw, and Saturnine are obviously in trouble. Enter the Fury, a symbiote. I don't know how to say that, but it's this guy. Nicely described by the random dude in blue next to him as an unstoppable amalgam of flesh and metal. And in case you were wondering what an amalgam is, it's an alloy of mercury and other metal that is solid or liquid at room temperature according to the proportion of mercury present, and is used especially in making tooth cements. Or simply, it's a mixture of different elements. Good job using a thesaurus, Alan Moore. Next, Jackdaw, beloved friend of Captain Britain, is killed by the Fury. Needless to say, Captain Britain is not amused. Actually, he's furious, no pun intended, and goes after the Fury for revenge. Then, after being completely confused and discombobulated by Mad Jim Jaspers, the Captain is ultimately blown to smithereens by the Fury. The end. Oh no wait, no it's not. Enter Merlin. That is, Merlin with a Y, not an I. He claims to be Merlin with an I, the guy in all those myths and legends and stuff, but it is nearly impossible to either prove or deny this, since Merlin with a Y is a habitual liar and manipulator. Either way, he and his daughter Roma resurrect, so to speak, Captain Britain from the few fragments of him that are left. And while Merlin is sifting through his memories, we get a glimpse of the original Captain Britain and even the Black Knight. Merlin then sends Captain Britain back to Earth 616 to complete his real mission, to lead the Fury to Mad Jim Jaspers, who's trying to rewrite reality and make himself the center of the universe. After facing a few hiccups along the way, including a mad computer, a creepy-looking assassin who really turns out to be Slaymaster, also known as a supervillain Captain Britain and Spider-Man encountered back in Super Spider-Man and Captain Britain number 243, Slaymaster's boss the Vixen, a group of mercenaries sent by Saturnine, this evil guy called Lord Mandragon, the Fury, again, and Mad Jim Jaspers, again. And eventually, the Fury killed Mad Jim Jaspers, and Captain Britain's new friend, Captain UK, killed the Fury. So how does Captain Britain fit into the strange world of Alan Moore? Well, this was not the first nor the last time Moore was or would be given the opportunity to revive a pre-existing character. He had previously worked on Miracle Man, a comic strip originating from the 1950s when it was known as Marvel Man. It was through the strength of his writing for Miracle Man that Alan Moore was given the chance to write for Captain Britain. In January 1984, Alan Moore employed the same tactics to the Saga of the Swamp Thing that he used for Captain Britain in the Saga of the Swamp Thing #1, Loose Ends. At the end of this first issue, Swamp Thing is shot through the head and killed. This gave Alan Moore a clean slate on which to implement his own vision for Swamp Thing and make it his own. Moore also loves to use allusions, sometimes to his other works and other times to ones that are not his, and some are more direct than others. In Rough Justice, we are shown Captain UK's nightmare of what happened to her home planet when the Fury ran amok on Earth 238. Here, Miracle Man makes an appearance, only to be obliterated by the Fury. And we also see a character named Rick, who wears a costume strikingly similar to young Marvel Man's, and, if you remember, young Marvel Man's real name is Dickie Dauntless in the original series. Another illusion is that of the smiley face, found on the bag of an old lady who unfortunately runs into the Fury. And while we don't know for certain that Alan Moore wrote this before he had started his work on Watchmen, which was published in 1986, we can say that whichever one was written second probably alludes to the other. One thing that caught my attention while reading Captain Britain, or should I say, didn't catch my attention, was the lack of sexual violence, at least in the collection of Captain Britain that I read, which was published in issues 2 through 7 of X-Men Archives. Alan Moore is well known for his use of sexual violence in his works. Watchmen, V for Vendetta, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Batman the Killing Joke, The Saga of the Swamp Thing, From Hell, and Lost Girls all contain sexual violence. And minus Lost Girls, that is 6 out of the 10 books we read this semester in class. Some other works by Alan Moore that Lance Parkin notes as including the seemingly recurring theme are Century 1910, Neonomicon, and Tom Strong. So, those are some of the reasons why I believe Captain Britain would have fit into the structure of our class. I really enjoyed reading Captain Britain, and for the most part, all the other works we read by Alan Moore also.